Alright, before the video starts, I just want to say I'm not great at editing or talking on camera, so the video's a little long and a little boring, but I still hope you enjoy it. See you later. Alright, with Age of Triumph releasing tomorrow as me recording this video, we still don't have any confirmation on the D3. So, in case, anyone's out there listening, I want to talk about how a potential loot system could work for Destiny 3. I mean, just imagine this. You have your favorite weapon, and as you play the game, it's constantly leveling up, getting better, gaining more perks, getting new cosmetics, looking cooler and cooler as you play until that weapon that started off at a low tier is now a maxed out special rarity tier weapon, right? That's what I'm going to go over today. So first off, why? Assuming we did Destiny 3, it would obviously need to feel different from Destiny 2. It would need to be its own game. And so I figured, why not start out with one of the most important parts of a looter shooter, that being the loot, right? So Bungie's tried multiple different loot systems throughout the course of Destiny 2, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. So I've looked at these, and I've tried to combine the best aspects from each one, while limiting the negative aspects of each one as much as possible, and trying to keep it feeling at least a little bit different and fresh. Right. On top of this, I want it to be unique and rewarding to both new players, as well as still having a chase for long-term endgame players. So, I believe it caters to both the person who plays maybe 5 hours a week and the person who plays 8 hours a day. Right. So first, looking at some of the old Destiny loot systems, right? First, we've got the rarity system. This was a thing for a while, primarily, though. It's most memorable pretty much from vanilla launch, right? So you have rarity of weapons, right? Gray or common, green and uncommon, blue and rare, and then purple and legendary, right? Now, the main flaws with this, it quickly turned into every weapon drop being a legendary or a purple, right? The gray, greens, and blues had no use or purpose really whatsoever. And so it kind of just turned into one rarity. And then the benefits of this system, though, is that it was easy to see at a glance if a weapon was worth keeping, right? If it wasn't purple, dismantle it. Next, we've got crafting, which is kind of the new kind of first step after re-adding random rolls, right? So weapons had a chance to drop with a red border. Once you achieved 5 red borders, then you could craft the weapon with the exact rolls you wanted, as well as this was the first time we got the ability to enhance traits. The flaws of the system, it kind of removed the feeling of getting a god roll, as the crafted weapon was just better. So it pretty much turned every activity into a checklist. So no matter what roll you got, if it was a red border, you would take out the pattern. If it wasn't a red border, you would just dismantle it, right? The benefits, though, is it was super helpful for vault space. Instead of needing to keep like 5 different versions of the same weapon, you could just keep one weapon and then recraft it for PvP or for PvE or for boss damage versus ad clear, right? Just recraft it to wherever you thought. And it was pretty beginner friendly, as you could see all the perks on a weapon without having to go to any third-party site or anything. Then finally, and most recently, we have tiered weapons, right? So each weapon drops between tier 1 and tier 5, this depending on your activity difficulty and the score you achieve on that activity, right? The flaws, first off, just the portal in general, right? I'm not going to beat on this. It's already been talked about a lot. Not a good system. Next, good loot was just way too common. It was pretty much just power level based, right? So as soon as you got to a high power level, everything dropped to tier 5. And it was also just kind of hard to tell immediately if weapons were good or not, right? It was kind of hard to see from afar if it was 4 stars or 5 stars, 3 stars or 4 stars, right? And then on top of this, there were just too many perks per drop, right? If you got 3 perks in each column, as well as 4 drops per activity, you would only have to do things 1 or 2 times to then have your god roll. That being said, it did give you a sense of progression as you increase your power level, seeing the tier of drops increase, and it allowed for fully enhanced weapons. So now I want to go into my system. First off, we're going to go back to rarity, similar to Vanilla D2 or other games like Diablo or Path of Exiles, right? So you've got your common drops, your uncommons, your rares, your legendaries. We're keeping adepts, just like we currently have. We've got a new tier called Master, and then obviously exotics, right? So the way it's going to work is when you get duplicates of a weapon, you can infuse it together to keep traits from both weapons, right? So say I get a common hand cannon with kill clip and, I don't know, outlaw, and then I get another common hand cannon with rampage and perpetual motion. I could combine those together to have that same common hand cannon with the choice of one of each of those perks. So now kind of going into what each weapon looks like, right? You're going to have a barrel, a mag, a sight, 2 traits, an origin trait, and of course your tracker. And then over here is going to show if it can be masterworked, if it can be enhanced, and if it can drop adept. Right, so common weapons will have your barrel, your mag, your sight, and just the 2 traits with no origin trait and no kill tracker. Next, moving on to uncommon weapons, you will have 2 barrels, 2 mags, still 1 sight, and 2 traits, still no origin tracker. However, you can masterwork it if for some reason you want to. Next, moving on to rare weapons. These will have 2 barrels, 2 mags, and 2 sights, 1 trait in each column, 1 origin trait, as well as being able to track either PvE or PvP kills. This can both be masterworked, and you can spend materials to enhance the perks. Next, moving on to legendary weapons. These will have 2 traits in each column, so you'll have 2 barrels, 2 mags, 2 sights, 2 column 1 and 2 traits, and 2 origin traits to choose from if the weapon has multiple origin traits. And then finally, both trackers. It can be fully masterworked, personally enhanced, and some of them can drop adept, right? Depending on the activity. Next, we have the mastered rarity. Now, this will have every single barrel, every single mag, every single sight, and so on. And I'm going to get to why that is later. The main kind of difference with this system is the infusion aspect. The way it works is when you have a duplicate of the same weapon, you infuse it together to combine the traits. And each weapon can drop at different tiers. So I'm going to now move on to that. So first off, how loot drops. Each weapon can drop at multiple rarities depending on the difficulty of the activity. So here's the example I like to use. We're going to use our shotgun work in progress 224. This drops from strikes, expert, master, and grandmaster nightfalls, right? So grandmasters drop legendary adepts, assuming you complete it and kill all the champions. Masters will drop our work in progress shotgun at legendary. Expert will drop it at rare, and base strikes will drop it at uncommon. Each activity has a small chance to drop 1 tier above its normal drop, aside from GMs, as again, mastered weapons are not in normal drop, and I'll get to that in a second. Now, this would go for anything, not just strikes. So for example, worlds would have tiers, right? So while you're exploring, that would be common. Lost sectors and public events, I imagine, would need to get buffed, so they are harder than the exploration mobs, but these could drop uncommon. Heroic public events and expert lost sectors, again assuming heroic public events got buffed, would then drop rares. And then master lost sectors would be legendaries. And then as we have the new equip zone, I'm just using that for my current example, but other events as well could increase the drops by 1 or 2 depending on the difficulty of the event, right? So the higher tier activity you do, the better loot that drops. This allows for someone who's really good at the game to complete activities that are much above their power level to get higher level drops, while also still allowing lower level players to get drops and infuse them, which I'm going to talk about now. So, combining weapons. The same weapon can be combined or infused with its duplicates, right? Now, different rarities can still be infused. So if I have a green work in progress shotgun 224 and I have a blue work in progress shotgun 224, I can still combine them together. When infusing the first weapon into a second weapon, I choose the perks in each column from the first weapon that will be added to the second weapon. Weapons with multiple perks per column will only transfer the one chosen perk from each column, and infused weapons keep the highest rarity. Now, if you fuse enough weapons of one rarity, it will eventually upgrade that weapon's rarity. So an example of this is if I have 5 common work in progress shotguns and I combine all into one shotgun 5 times, it'll eventually turn into an uncommon weapon. This will allow newer players or less skilled players to still get those higher rarity weapons. It will just take longer and more materials. So, now we're going to go how masterworks function, right? When you first masterwork a weapon, it will enhance 1 stat by 10, similar to what has always happened in all of D2. Now, in addition, it will unlock the ability to level up the weapon, just like how crafted weapons worked. As you get kills, complete activities, or combine and infuse more weapons into this weapon, the level will increase. Now, I imagine each level here will be more difficult than the crafted system, but every 5 levels will increase 1 more stat by 5. Once a weapon is fully leveled up, all stats will be boosted by +5, and you will get to choose which primary stat you want to be enhanced to +10. So say, for example, I have a hand cannon that I have fully masterworked. In PvP, I may want the range stat enhanced. However, when I go into PvE, I may want the reload stat enhanced. So there'll be a way to choose which one. Next, you can also just spend materials to skip levels. Next, how enhanced traits work. So first off, every rarity of weapon has a random chance to drop with one or more perks already enhanced. This is a very low chance though. The better the rarity of the weapon, the higher the chance that one or multiple perks drop enhanced. So that being said, for rare weapons or better, you can spend materials to enhance perks. So that would be your main perks, your barrel, your mag, your sight, and your origin trait. If you have multiple perks unlocked in a column, right? Say you've infused a weapon a bunch of times, and so you've got 4 perks in column 1 or whatever. You will have to enhance each perk individually. Now, enhanced barrels and mags will just give you basic weapon stat boosts. The enhanced sight only really allows you to change the color. It's not going to affect the stats too much. That way you don't feel like you have to use a sight you don't like because its stats are better. And then finally, enhanced perks will boost the effect or change it in some way. That is the same thing for the origin trait. Now, how adepts work. Adepts are similar to legendaries with a few differences. They'll have slightly better stats, a special cosmetic or ornament, and a kill effect. Perks come automatically enhanced, and it will come automatically masterworked at level 5, which means it'll have one primary stat at +10, one secondary stat at +5. Now, the cosmetic or ornament will be similar to what we have on the current tier 5s, where it's kind of just a special shader. If you decide to put a shader on it, you will not see that ornament anymore. Now, what we've all been waiting for, how mastered weapons work. When you have an infused legendary weapon, adept or not, with every single perk in every column enhanced, you have it masterworked to max level, only then does that weapon become mastered. Mastered weapons show and track both PvE and PvP kills in the weapon inspect screen, meaning you don't have to choose which one you want to track. It's automatically going to keep track of both of these. Next, on top of this, they have a special cosmetic or ornament. This is going to be more similar to how exotic ornaments or old ornaments worked for legendary weapons, where it changes the shape or look of the gun, and applying a shader just puts a shader on the new look of the gun, right? Now, it will also have a special kill effect, just like how adepts do. And in addition, it will show your kill count while holding the weapon, like during gameplay. So if you're running through a strike with a mastered weapon, you're going to see a little thing on the side of the weapon with a number on it showing your amount of kills, right? So it'll show guardian kills or PvE kills depending on the activity. So it'll automatically detect, are you fighting the environment or are you fighting players? And it'll show that kill count, right? Mastered weapons can be made adept, but only if there's already a legendary adept counterpart, and you're going to need to infuse an adept for a large material cost. Master adept weapons have both the master and adept ornaments and kill effects, and when turning a master weapon adept, it will get that slight stat bump. So for example, you have a raid weapon that you get to mastered, and you want to make that master raid weapon adept. You're then going to have to do the master raid to get the adept weapon, and then spend X amount of materials to make that weapon mastered. So, now I have a few variations of the loot system. The first one that I think could enhance and add longevity is to decrease the number of perks that are transferred from one weapon to the next during infusion. So instead of one perk from each column being added to the new weapon, X number of traits would be added. So still one for each column, right? So I can't do 2 barrels to one weapon if I wanted to. Now, X could be a static number like 2, where every time I infuse, I get to add 2 traits to the primary weapon. This would increase the amount of drops needed to unlock every perk on one weapon and to master the weapon. And in addition, this could add a new material that allows you to infuse 3 traits instead of 2 traits, or 4 traits instead of 3 traits, again, depending on what that number X is. So now looking at some of the pros and cons of this system, right? The cons, and also a potential pro, is that it makes fully unlocking the weapon take much longer. Again, this enhances playtime, but also can be kind of offsetting for newer players. Now, this could lead to frustration when the wrong perk is infused, right? You're not always getting the perk you want. So you get a god roll, but it's not on your weapon with all the perks. And so you go to infuse it, and then maybe you only get one of those god roll perks. Next, pros. Again, this could be a pro, could be a con. It makes unlocking weapons take much longer. It brings back RNG and kind of more of that old D1 sort of grinding in new ways, right? So you got to grind a bunch of drops of the weapon just like before. And just because you get the god roll doesn't mean it's going to be on your fully enhanced weapon until you get every single perk. This also adds more materials with unique uses, right? It just gives you more things to collect and grind for, as well as new ways for Bungie to reward players. So, next, on a similar example, X, as mentioned before, could be based on weapon rarity. So, for example, when you infuse a common weapon, maybe you only transfer 1 perk to the infused weapon, but when you infuse a rare weapon, you infuse 2 perks, right? So this could just change based on weapon difficulty. You would be able to choose X perks to increase the chance that they are transferable, right? So say I have my legendary weapon, and I really like the barrel, and I really like the origin trait, but I don't really care about the column 1 and 2 perks. I don't care about the sight or the mag. I could choose, hey, I want my barrel, and I want my origin trait to transfer, and that would give them a much higher chance of being transferred to the weapon compared to the other perks. It would not be a guarantee, similar to how focusing for specific armor drops works now, but it would increase it. Some benefits to this: there's a slight penalty to newer or less skilled players. And then if you do this in reverse to make the late game gear take longer, it kind of makes them feel less special, so I don't think that'd be the way to do it. It can make some benefits, though, is it can make higher loot feel more special and just kind of increase the playtime and give players more to do. I personally think just 2 perks transferring at a time would be best, but then you get to choose which 2 perks you want to have the highest chance of being transferred over. Next, moving on. The third variation is to increase the price of infusion for higher rarity items. So a common weapon would be much cheaper than an uncommon versus an uncommon to a rare, and so on, right? So this would make getting mastered weapons harder and give materials less of a chance to get stockpiled just into oblivion in your vault, right? I know I've got like 3 stacks of masterwork cores right now, right? So for example, infusing a common into a common may take 1 enhancement core, assuming we use the same materials as Destiny 2, may take 1 enhancement core and 1,000 glimmer, versus infusing an adept legendary into an adept legendary might take 2 enhancement prisms and 10,000 glimmer, or just something like that, right? So this just adds more playtime for streamers and other players with lots of grind time. And I need to get rid of this. It benefits newer players as they don't need to use as many materials. Yeah, that's pretty much it. There's not a whole lot of downsides to this, I think. And then the final one I thought of is you could just remove the sights and scopes and just keep 1 sight per gun as we have right now. This adds less variety and personality to each weapon, but it does increase simplicity for newer players. So I'm going to go over the system one more time. Each weapon can drop at a rarity between common and legendary, with some having adept legendary. As you get multiple perks, multiple versions of the same weapon, you can infuse them together until eventually you get every perk on 1 weapon. This allows you to see all the perks a weapon can drop without having to go to a third-party site, as well as that lets each weapon feel more personalized. A God Roll legendary will be just as effective as a mastered weapon. It just won't look as cool and you won't be able to choose between multiple perks. The way I imagine choosing your perks would work, as again, you don't want to just have 8 perks going down on your screen, is you would see your 2 primary perks. It would be almost like a drop-down menu. When you want to change your perk, you just click it, and then choose the new perk you want to choose in each column. This gives a more personalized weapon to late-game, end-game players, gives you something to grind for, and incentivizes replayability of all activities, as even when you get your God Roll, you could still keep going for that mastered weapon. Alright, real quickly, some things I thought of as I was editing the video. One thing you could do as well is increase the loot per minute, the lower the rarity, right? So, for example, common weapons you could get much faster than you could get legendary weapons. So, like, say you complete a Grandmaster Nightfall, maybe it drops 1 singular legendary adept, but then it'll also drop like a blue and like 2 uncommons and maybe 3 commons or something like that, right? That way, you're still getting a bunch of the other ones to kind of fill out the perks faster. On top of this, again, I just want to emphasize that a God Roll drop will be just as effective as a mastered weapon. This means that just because someone plays the game more doesn't mean their weapons are automatically going to just be better. They just may be core or feel more personalized if you put the time in to master that weapon. Some other downsides I can see with this system are just that it's still very similar to the D2 system. I do personally, again, I'm biased, I made it, but I do personally think it's better than the current D2 system. But again, it is very similar, and I think for Destiny 3, we would want something very different. I never played D1, so I don't know how the weapons work there, but I know there's a lot of material farming on planets. Maybe something similar to that, where there's more ways to grind materials for your weapons, could be kind of cool. But yeah, that's about it. That's all I got for today. So thank you all, and I'll see you next time.